Sunderland beat Crystal Palace 2-1 at home in a very interesting game. Let's get straight into it because it was a game of two halves. The first half, Crystal Palace were on the counterattacks. Every chance they had to take the ball from Sunderland, they would steal it and just run with it, right? Brendan Johnson didn't have the best of games. I would say that even Jeremy Pino had an alright game. I feel like you expect more from him from being the creative 10 in that team. Adam Wharton wasn't really too good. He's one of the players that I rate very highly. But I feel like in this Crystal Palace team, he's kind of slowed down over the last couple of weeks. I think Crystal Palace on its own right now isn't at its best, right? You have Oliver Glasner coming out and speaking against the club, speaking out against the people up in the hierarchy. It's kind of a mess right now at Crystal Palace. They just lost their captain, Margay. They lost Eze in the summer. Like, these are two pillars of the club. And right now they're not at their best. But that first half, Mateta created a couple chances. Mitchell had the header that Mateta had crossed the ball into. Crystal Palace had the chances in the first half. They really did. Sunderland had the possession, but they weren't really doing much with it up until the goal they scored, right? When they scored that goal, you kind of got the idea of how Sunderland wanted to play that game, right? They weren't too creative. Enzo Lefebvre was missing up until that first goal. Enzo Lefebvre is their creative player. He is a creative spark, and he wasn't really on it until he scored the goal, right? Even in the second half, he was missing a little bit, in my opinion, right? Because I like Enzo Lefebvre. In past games, he's been the guy that they pass the ball to and he creates something, but not today. Up until that goal of Sunderland, I genuinely thought that Crystal Palace were the better team. They were, even though they didn't have possession, the counterattacks were dangerous. Mateta was dangerous, and he was on it. I believe even I forgot his name. I think Vinny. I think that's his name, the right wing back. He came on for Munoz. Munoz has been injured and he's been in and out lately, but he came on and he was dangerous as well. This is a very well worked team, so I understand why Oliver Glasner is so mad with the loss with the player that he's lost, and I think that's why he announced that he's leaving the summer. But on the other hand, the second half was all Sunderland. They had the ball, they had the possession, they had the chances. There was a very dominant second half until like the last 5 to 8 minutes when Crystal Palace were trying to go for the game. But by that time, Sunderland were set. I think some of the best players this game were Granit Xhaka and Alderete. I think they were outstanding. Their ball playing on and off the ball, they were on it. The amount of times Alderete won the ball, whether it was aerially or whether it was Crystal Palace trying to counterattack them. By the second half, Alderete had them read, and he knew exactly what he had to do. Granit Xhaka on the ball was outstanding. I don't need to keep talking about Granit Xhaka. I talk about him every week. He is the pillar of this team. He plays so many games. You can kind of tell he didn't have the best of first half. You can kind of tell his legs are slowing down because of how many games he's played at this age, and he plays the full 90 minutes. Like, he gets no rest, right? But for that second Sunderland goal, it was Granit Xhaka and Alderete passing the ball. Alderete dribbles the ball passed by. He passes to Siddiqui. Siddiqui does an amazing play. He's one of those players that they needed back. They needed Siddiqui back after while he was in AFCON. He came back, passes to Brobbey, and Brobbey's goal is so weird, right? Because you expect Brobbey to shoot his left, you expect him to cross the ball, but no, he gets the ball. He with his first time with his right and just smashes it into the goal. He smashes into the goal. He even came out, I think, a bit injured after that. He got back up. He didn't even celebrate the goal. And it was 2-1 Sunderland. It was such a good play. It was such a good play. I think you got to give a big shout out to their coach. I think like a big shout out to again Granit Xhaka, Alderete. I think between those two were my man of the match. Brobbey had some nice scuffles with Lacroix. I think Brobbey he's one of those strikers that when he came in to the Prem, you usually hear a lot from the Ajax talent coming out. You usually hear a lot from people at Ajax who are playing very well, and I don't think Brobbey was one of those players. Like, people knew Brobbey because he's the striker for Ajax, but he wasn't really known. People were really waiting for him to take that next step. But Sunderland lose Margui. They call him up. They buy Brobbey, and he's been they're one of some of their best attackers right now. Right now they're missing Talby, who was in AFCON, but Brobbey's been doing the job. Enzo Lefebvre had a better second half. I expect more from Enzo Lefebvre. But overall, Sunderland had a very good game. They had a very good second half. First half, They didn't really create much, like I said. But defensively, they look solid, right? Roos is one of those players, right? Like I said, the first goal of the Crystal Palace only goal, Roos kind of scuffs it. He's one of the goalkeepers that I like because he comes out. He's very good at claiming the balls. He's very good at coming out against Newcastle. He was very good at coming out and claiming the balls. And even in the second half in this game itself, he would come out and claim a lot of crosses. But for the Crystal Palace's goal, he didn't. He scuffed it, and Enzo Lefebvre was pretty slow to his reaction when Crystal Palace made the goal. But over the entirety of the game, I think Roos was outstanding. I think Enzo Lefebvre, like I said, he was underwhelming in my opinion, even though he got the goal. He's one of those players you expect to be on the ball most of the time. And Mukiele and Reinildo, what a pairing they are because Mukiele, well, we've talked about this, right? Mukiele is one of those players that he could play a right center back, he could play a right back, and he is so deadly when it comes to running up down that wing. And so is Reinildo. Reinildo defensively, it's so hard to beat him one on one. And when it comes to driving the ball forward, he always moves forward. He's not one of those that just passes and stays back. He always tries to make the run to create space for the player or to get the ball on the end of it. And look, I think I'm pretty sure they lost their last game and they haven't been on the best of runs. They've been very inconsistent. But Sunderland is in those positions where they could maybe battle for a conference league. They could maybe battle for those type of positions. And let's just see, right? Because they still need Talby back. And I think he was one of their best players before he left to AFCON. There's some AFCON players who are barely coming in from everything. They're barely adapting, getting back into the Premier League. Let's see how it goes, right? Sunderland beat Crystal Palace pretty convincingly, I would say. And let's see what happens with these teams, with these, because these mid-table battle right now, it's very interesting. You have Sunderland, you have Crystal Palace, who will always be around there. Newcastle is coming up now. The top five, top six, like are kind of setting themselves right with United. You have City, you have Arsenal. Liverpool is still very consistent, but they're there. Chelsea is right there. Tottenham's out of it. It's such a weird it's such a weird mid-table team battle right now. But let's see how Sunderland are. They're keeping their composure, they're keeping their players, and they're playing very well. Let's see if they buy some players. I doubt they will because they did a lot of summer signings. But let's just see how it goes.